Charlotte had always lived a modest life in Birmingham, working as a secretary at a small law firm. Her days were predictable: papers to file, letters to type, polite greetings with colleagues, and evenings spent in her small flat above the bakery on St. John's Street. She never thought her life would take any extraordinary turn. One Thursday morning, as the office boy sorted through the Morning Post, he paused with a puzzled look and handed her a thick cream-colored envelope. Her name was written in a flowing script that seemed almost too elegant for the ordinary bills and notices she usually received. "Looks like something important, Miss Turner," the boy said with a grin. Charlotte slipped the letter into her handbag, finishing her tasks before retreating to the quiet of her desk. With careful fingers, she broke the red wax seal and unfolded the heavy paper inside. Her eyes scanned the words, her breath catching at the first line. To Miss Charlotte Turner. It is my solemn duty to inform you that you are the sole heir of Mrs. Agnes Whitford, late of Ashcombe House, Shropshire. Her hands trembled. She had never heard of a Mrs. Whitford. She read on, the letter stating that the elderly widow had passed away 3 months earlier, leaving behind a substantial property, an estate that now belonged entirely to her. Questions spun in her mind. Who was this woman? Why had she, a stranger, chosen Charlotte as her heir? And why now, after a life of obscurity, was she being called to inherit a house she had never seen? That evening, Charlotte sat in her flat with the letter laid out before her, the words illuminated by the soft glow of her lamp. Something about the tone of the letter unsettled her. It was formal, yet there lingered a weight between the lines, as though this inheritance carried more than just bricks and mortar. It felt like a summons. The following week, she found herself on a train heading towards Shropshire. The countryside rolled past the window, the fields bathed in late afternoon light. With every mile, a strange mixture of dread and curiosity grew in her chest. When the train slowed at the quiet village station, Charlotte stepped out into the cool air. A driver awaited her, holding a placard with her name, ready to take her to Ashcombe House. As the carriage rattled through winding lanes bordered by ancient oaks, Charlotte caught her first glimpse of the estate. The house rose at the crest of a hill, its stone walls weathered by centuries, tall windows glinting in the fading sun. Yet there was no warmth in its appearance. It seemed to brood over the land like a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. The carriage halted before the grand iron gates. As they creaked open, Charlotte felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. Something about Ashcombe House was waiting for her, and she could not yet tell whether it was a welcome or a warning. The carriage rolled slowly up the gravel drive, its wheels crunching over the stones as Charlotte craned her neck to take in the vast house before her. Ashcombe House loomed larger with each turn of the wheels, its ivy-clad walls climbing high towards the darkening sky. The late autumn air carried the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, mingling with something faintly metallic, like the tang of old iron. At the foot of the grand steps stood a man in a dark coat, his posture upright and formal. As the carriage stopped, he stepped forward and opened the door with a precise movement. "Miss Turner, I presume," he said, his voice steady but not without a certain gravity. "I am Mr. Harland, the caretaker of Ashcombe House. We have been expecting you." The words unsettled her. Expecting her? She had only received the letter days before. Still, she followed him up the stone steps, the sound of her shoes echoing against the walls of the grand entrance hall as he opened the heavy oak door. Inside, the house seemed to swallow her whole. The ceiling soared above, adorned with a painted mural dulled by dust and time. Chandeliers hung like frozen rain, their crystals dimmed. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors lined the walls, their eyes following her with unnerving persistence. "You will find Ashcombe House vast," Mr. Harland said, his footsteps deliberate as he led her along a wide corridor. "It has stood for nearly 4 centuries. Mrs. Whitford was its last mistress. She valued tradition above all things. And she was family to me." Charlotte asked, her voice tentative. The caretaker paused, his back still to her. "Family, yes. Though the connection may not be immediately clear. His answer gave nothing away. He pushed open the door to a drawing room, where a fire had been lit, its glow chasing away the gloom. A tray of tea sat waiting on a small table, as though someone had prepared it moments before her arrival. Charlotte lowered herself into a high-backed chair, her gaze drifting to a portrait above the mantel. It was of a woman in her later years, dressed in black lace, her eyes sharp and watchful. A small brass plate beneath bore the name, Agnes Whitford. Charlotte felt an odd tightening in her chest. Though she had never seen this woman before, there was a strange familiarity in the curve of her mouth, in the tilt of her head, as though some echo of her lived within Charlotte herself. "You will be shown to your chambers shortly," Mr. Harland said, breaking her thoughts. "Dinner will be served at 7. Until then, may I suggest you take some rest? The journey can be tiring." Charlotte nodded, though she was not weary. Instead, she felt alert, her mind restless. As Mr. Harland left the room, she was struck by the silence of the house. It was not the comfortable hush of solitude, but a watchful quiet, as though the walls themselves were listening. When the clock in the hall struck 6, a low chime reverberated through the corridors. Charlotte stood and crossed to the window. The garden stretched out beneath the fading light, its hedges twisted into shapes that seemed almost grotesque in the dusk. And there, just at the edge of the trees, she thought she saw a figure. Pale, unmoving, watching her. She blinked, and it was gone. Yet the feeling lingered. Ashcombe House was not empty. Something else had been waiting for her long before she arrived. Dinner was served precisely at 7 in a long dining hall where shadows pulled in the corners. A solitary place had been set for her at the head of the table. The room felt far too large for a single guest, its high ceiling echoing with the soft clatter of cutlery against porcelain. Mr. Harland stood discreetly by the door, as though ensuring every moment of her meal was observed. The food was fine, roast pheasant, root vegetables, and a glass of dark claret, but Charlotte could not shake the feeling that she was being tested somehow, watched not only by the caretaker but by the painted eyes of ancestors that lined the walls. After dinner, Harland approached her with a candlestick in hand. "If you are ready, Miss Turner, I shall show you to your chambers." They ascended the sweeping staircase, the flame casting long flickering shadows across the banisters. On the landing, the corridor branched in two directions. Harland guided her to the left, yet Charlotte's gaze was drawn to the right, where a row of tall doors stood closed, dust thick upon the handles. "What lies down there?" she asked, her voice carrying softly in the vast hall. Harland's step faltered almost imperceptibly before he replied. "That wing has been closed for many years. It is not in use." "Why?" His expression darkened. "It is best left alone." Charlotte felt a shiver travel her spine, though she said nothing more. He opened a door to a chamber furnished with a four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet. The air smelled faintly of lavender and something older, something hidden beneath the scent. "Should you require anything, ring the bell pull." "Good night, Miss Turner." When Harland departed, the silence closed in around her once more. Charlotte lit a second candle and moved about the room, tracing her hand along the carved wood of the wardrobe, the embroidered curtains. Everything seemed untouched, as if preserved for a guest who had never arrived. Her eyes wandered again to the corridor outside. She could not forget the sight of those locked doors, standing in a line like sentinels guarding secrets. The house seemed to breathe around her, the air shifting with the faint groans of ancient timbers. At last she drew the curtains and prepared for rest. Yet as she slipped beneath the quilt, her ears caught a faint sound. It was not the sigh of the wind, nor the creak of settling beams. It was softer, rhythmic. Footsteps. They came from the direction of the locked wing, slow and deliberate, as though someone paced behind those sealed doors. Charlotte held her breath. The steps halted. Silence followed. But then, 3 slow knocks, muffled by distance, resounded through the corridor. The following morning, Charlotte woke with a heaviness in her chest. The memory of the knocks from the night before clung to her like cobwebs. For a while she lay still, listening. The house creaked and sighed as if settling its old bones, but no further sounds came. When she descended to breakfast, Mr. Harland was already waiting. He served her tea and bread with silent efficiency, his face unreadable. Charlotte wanted to ask about the footsteps and the knocking, but something in his expression warned her against it. Instead, she decided to explore. After breakfast, she wandered through the house, the soles of her shoes echoing on polished floors. She passed drawing rooms with heavy curtains, parlors thick with the scent of dust, and long galleries lined with portraits whose painted eyes never seemed to look away. Her steps carried her into the library, a cavernous chamber with shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. The air smelled of leather and faded ink. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light spilling through tall windows. Charlotte traced her hand along the spines of the books. Many were old histories, collections of sermons, faded volumes of poetry. Yet one book lay apart from the rest on a desk near the window. Its cover was cracked, its leather softened with age. Curious, she opened it. It was a journal. The handwriting inside was looping and elegant, though hurried in places, as if written in agitation. The entries belonged to Agnes Whitford. Charlotte's pulse quickened as she began to read. October 12th. The voices returned last night. They come from the East Wing, though it has been shut these 20 years. I hear her there, pacing as she did when she was alive. Charlotte frowned. The entries continued, each more disturbed than the last. October 19th. I cannot sleep. The sound of her crying reaches me even here. I dare not open the doors. If I do, she will be waiting. Charlotte's hands grew cold as she turned the pages. The final entry sent a shudder through her. October 25th. She knows I have hidden the truth. She will not rest until it is spoken. The girl is gone, but the house remembers. And soon, so shall I. Charlotte closed the journal sharply, her heart racing. She could almost feel the room close in on her. A girl. Gone. Hidden truth. The words swirled like shadows at the edge of her mind. She replaced the book, but the thought gnawed at her. Who was the girl? What had happened in the East Wing that had caused it to be locked away? The silence of the library pressed down on her. Then, faintly, from somewhere above, she heard the unmistakable sound of a door creaking open. And she knew it came from the locked wing. Charlotte rose early the next morning, determined to face the village again. She needed answers, and she would not find them by hiding inside the old house. Dressing warmly against the chill, she walked along the winding lane that led to the heart of the village. The stone cottages looked almost too perfect, as though time had spared them deliberately. Yet behind the lace curtains, she felt unseen eyes following her every step. At the local bakery, she bought a loaf of bread, hoping the act might spark casual conversation. The baker, a stout woman with flour dusting her apron, handed over the loaf without a smile. You'll be wanting to keep the doors locked at night, the woman muttered, her voice scarcely more than a whisper. When Charlotte asked why, the woman's eyes darted away. Best not to linger after dark, that's all. Later, at the pub, Charlotte overheard two men murmuring about her. They sat by the hearth, mugs of ale in hand, their voices carrying through the low beams. She looks just like her, one said. Poor girl, has no idea what she's walked into. The other shook his head. The widow should have let the place rot. Some doors are never meant to be opened again. Charlotte's heart quickened. She pretended not to hear, though their words lodged firmly in her mind. She returned to the manor with the bread untouched in her basket, her thoughts heavy with suspicion. That night, she found a slip of paper pushed under the front door. The handwriting was hurried, almost desperate. It read, "Leave while you still can." before the house claims you as it claimed her. Charlotte's hands trembled as she held the note. Someone in the village knew more than they dared to say aloud. But who had left the warning, and what fate had befallen the woman before her? The grandfather clock struck midnight, its echo filling the hall. In that moment, Charlotte realized she was no longer entirely alone in the house. Sleep eluded Charlotte that night. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, the warning note still on the bedside table. Every creak of the floorboards, every moan of the wind through the chimney felt deliberate, as though the house itself wished to remind her of its presence. At dawn, unable to bear the suffocating silence, she wandered the corridors of the manor. The house was vast, its passages stretching into corners that seemed oddly forgotten. Dust thickened in some rooms, while others appeared curiously untouched, as though still lived in. In the library, she trailed her fingers along the spines of leather-bound volumes until she noticed one book that stuck out slightly farther than the rest. Curious, she tugged it. To her astonishment, the shelf gave a subtle shudder, and a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a narrow, concealed passage. The air within was cold and stale. With her heart pounding, Charlotte lit a candle and stepped inside. The passage twisted until it opened into a small chamber hidden at the very heart of the house. Here, the walls were covered with faded portraits, women who bore an uncanny resemblance to her. Some were painted, others photographed, yet all of them shared her sharp jawline and dark eyes. On a wooden table rested a journal, its cover worn and fragile. She opened it and read hurried lines written in a desperate hand. "The house binds us. It does not forget. Each chosen must endure until the end." Charlotte's breath caught in her throat. The entries grew darker, filled with pleas for freedom and references to the widow's bargain. The last page ended abruptly, the ink smeared as though the pen had been torn from its writer's grasp. Then, from somewhere deep in the walls, a sound stirred, a dragging, uneven step moving closer. The flame of her candle flickered violently. Charlotte froze, realizing she was not the first to discover this chamber. And perhaps, she would not be the last. Charlotte fled from the hidden chamber, her candle trembling in her grip. She slammed the panel shut behind her, pressing her back against the library wall. The sound of the dragging footsteps had faded, yet she felt them echo inside her chest. Later that day, she sought answers from Mrs. Hargreaves, the housekeeper who had worked in the manor decades ago. The old woman's face stiffened at the mention of the hidden chamber. With a trembling voice, she spoke at last. They called her the widow of Greystone. She was a woman scorned, abandoned by her husband, who turned to dark rites for vengeance. The story says she made a bargain, to bind her bloodline to the house, so it would never be forgotten. Each generation, a chosen woman would return, whether she willed it or not. Charlotte's skin prickled. "You mean, me?" Mrs. Hargreaves only looked at her with sorrowful eyes. "I warned them when they sent the letter. You should never have come here." That evening, Charlotte returned to her room, determined to deny the weight of superstition. Yet the house would not allow denial. Doors creaked open of their own accord. Shadows clung too long at the edges of the corridors. And then came the dreams, darker, sharper than before. She saw the widow, her figure draped in black, her face pale beneath a lace veil. In the dream, the widow stretched out a hand, whispering words Charlotte could not fully hear. But one sentence rang clear, slicing through her sleep like a blade. "You carry my debt." Charlotte awoke with a strangled cry, the air in her chamber bitter cold. On the table beside her lay the journal she had left in the hidden room. Only now, there was a new line scrawled across the final page. "Welcome home, Charlotte." Charlotte did not leave her room until daylight, too shaken by the words that had appeared in the journal. When she finally stepped into the corridor, she noticed something unnerving. The portraits along the hallway seemed different. Their painted eyes followed her more intently, and in the softened morning light, she thought their lips curved into faint, knowing smiles. Determined to escape the suffocating air of the house, she ventured into the nearby village. Yet even there, the whispers followed her. As she walked past the bakery, the inn, the churchyard, villagers paused in their tasks to watch her. Their gazes were not hostile, but filled with something far worse, pity. An elderly man approached her outside the post office, leaning heavily on his cane. "You should not stay there, miss," he said in a low voice. "That house does not let go. It keeps what it claims." Before Charlotte could reply, a woman dragged the old man away, muttering under her breath. The message, however, was clear. Everyone knew what haunted the manor, and everyone feared it. That evening, the house grew restless. Doors slammed though no wind stirred. The sound of footsteps echoed on the staircases though Charlotte was alone. She locked herself in her chamber, yet sleep betrayed her again. In her dream, the widow was not alone. A ring of women stood around her, their faces blurred but eerily similar to Charlotte's own. They whispered in unison, a chorus of voices that filled the darkness. "Join us." The floor beneath her feet seemed to soften, pulling her down into the earth. She awoke gasping, only to find the sound of whispers still lingering in her room. And then she noticed it. Her reflection in the mirror across the chamber did not move as she did. It lingered, staring back at her with eyes that were no longer hers. Charlotte stood frozen before the mirror, her reflection staring back with a hunger that chilled her marrow. Slowly, the image lifted its hand, pressing against the glass as if testing a barrier. Charlotte stepped back, yet the reflection did not follow. It only smiled, a smile that did not belong to her. The house groaned around her, timbers shifting as though something deep within stirred. Drawn by an instinct she could not fight, Charlotte found herself walking towards the library once more. The candle in her grip flickered violently, yet its flame never died. The panel in the wall opened without her touch, the hidden chamber welcoming her back. This time, the air was colder, the portraits more alive, their eyes glittering with malice. On the table, the journal now lay open, its pages turning on their own as if unseen hands searched for something. When it stopped, a new entry bled across the paper in fresh ink. The chosen must take her place. Charlotte's throat tightened. The portraits seemed to lean forward, the painted women whispering. And then she heard it, the shuffle of skirts, the tread of countless feet. From the shadows of the chamber emerged the widow, her veil fluttering as though moved by a wind that did not exist. Behind her came the others, women from the portraits, stepping down from their frames. Their faces were clearer now, and each one was hers. Versions of Charlotte through time, each bound to the house, each waiting for her. The widow raised her hand, and the air pressed down heavy as stone. Charlotte's candle extinguished, plunging the chamber into darkness save for the gleam of eyes surrounding her. "You carry my debt," the widow whispered again. "Now take your place." The cold hands of her mirrored selves reached for her, dragging her toward the wall where a new portrait frame stood, empty, waiting. Charlotte's scream echoed through Greystone Manor, swallowed by the house that never forgets. And then, silence. Only the flicker of a lamp in the empty corridor above, burning steady through the night.